For years, whispers of impossible discoveries drifted through academic circles: ancient monoliths hidden in remote forests, oversized footprints found in untouched valleys, and strange underground chambers carved with impossible precision. Most scholars dismissed these accounts as exaggerations or misidentified natural formations. But a few researchers, those willing to look beyond conventional timelines, sensed a deeper truth buried beneath centuries of silence. They believed the Earth still held secrets far older than humanity, waiting for the right eyes to uncover them. My interest began as a simple curiosity, sparked by an old field report describing stone pillars found deep in the Pacific Northwest. The report contained only 2 photographs before it was abruptly archived, but the images were enough to ignite an obsession. The engravings on the stones were unlike any indigenous patterns, too symmetrical and too advanced to be artifacts of a primitive culture. Something about them felt deliberate, crafted by hands far larger and stronger than those of early humans. As I investigated further, I discovered a pattern hidden in forgotten research papers, rescinded abstracts, and missing expedition logs. Scientists who dared to suggest the existence of a giant, prehistoric species often found their careers cut short or their discoveries mysteriously erased. Yet fragments of their work remained scattered across obscure journals and private letters, pointing to the same conclusion: a civilization of colossal beings once walked the earth, leaving behind structures that defied explanation. The more I studied the evidence, the more I realized that these weren't coincidences. The locations of the discoveries formed a deliberate path across mountain ranges, forest corridors, and seismic hotspots. It was as if the ancient builders had charted a network of sites connected by natural energy lines within the earth. My curiosity evolved into conviction. I knew that if I followed the clues, I would uncover something monumental, something the world had forgotten or chosen to hide. Armed with old maps, scattered coordinates, and fragments of suppressed research, I set out on an expedition into the heart of the Cascade Mountains. I expected difficult terrain, unpredictable weather, and challenging logistics. What I didn't expect was the overwhelming sense of intelligence woven into the landscape itself. From the moment I stepped into those forests, it felt as though something immense was watching, something that had existed long before humanity's first written chapter. As I trekked deeper into the wilderness, the signs grew harder to ignore. Carvings too massive for human hands. Footprints too heavy for any known species. Vibrations in the ground that moved with purpose. Every step drew me closer to an undeniable truth: these mountains were not merely natural formations. They were living archives, repositories of a lost civilization that shaped the land with strength and knowledge far beyond modern understanding. I began this journey as an archaeologist searching for answers. But the deeper I ventured, the more I realized I had entered a world where science collided with myth, and where the line between legend and reality dissolved beneath my boots. The giants of antiquity were not fantasies. They had left their mark across the land, carved into the bedrock of time. And as the forests darkened around me, I understood that I was not uncovering their story by accident. I was being led to it. I had spent most of my career hiking through forgotten mountain trails, cataloging soil samples, and documenting erosion layers that dated back thousands of years. But nothing prepared me for the strange rock formation I encountered on that cold morning in the Cascade Range. The stones were stacked too precisely to be natural, and the engravings carved across their faces resembled no indigenous style I had ever studied. As the wind cut across the ridge, something ancient stirred in my chest, a sense that I had stepped into a place I was never meant to find. When I knelt down to examine the central slab, my hands trembled. The grooves were deep, deliberate, and shockingly uniform, as if carved by a tool far stronger than any early human instrument. The symbols were arranged in a perfect sequence, almost like a mathematical code. My radio crackled behind me, but I ignored it, unable to tear my eyes from the markings. Every instinct told me these stones held a truth older than recorded history. And for the first time in my career, I felt small, not because of the mountains, but because of the intelligence behind those carvings. The soil around the structure felt disturbed, but not recently. It was as though the earth itself had once been reshaped to hide the formation. I brushed away layers of cold dust and sediment, revealing more patterns that appeared geometric and impossibly symmetrical. A sudden feeling washed over me, a sense of being watched even though the ridge was silent. I paused, listening. Only the distant howl of winter wind answered me, yet the sensation of an unseen presence lingered. As I mapped the location with my GPS, an unsettling thought took hold. This site was not listed in any archaeological database, nor in any tribal archive I had access to. That meant it had been deliberately omitted or systematically erased. The realization sent a jolt through me. Why hide a structure this advanced, this ancient? And more importantly, who built it? I felt a tension in the air, as if the ground itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to understand something far beyond my training. I took my first photographs. The stone angles, the engraved spear, the geometric patterns, seemed almost pulsating under the morning light. Each shot revealed details I had missed, parallel striations, unusual quartz infusions, and what appeared to be fingerprints fossilized directly into the rock. That discovery made my heart lurch. No known hominid could leave marks like those. The impressions were immense, heavy, deliberate, like the hands of a being far larger than any human ancestor. When I zoomed in on one particular marking, everything inside me went still. For elongated grooves, each nearly the width of my palm, slashed across the stone's surface in a perfect arc. They were too symmetrical to be accidental. Too purposeful to be erosion. I ran my fingers over them, feeling the cold indentations. The shape resembled something primal, something I had only ever heard whispered in ranger reports and fringe anthropology notes. But I pushed the thought away. Legends had no place in scientific study. Or so I believed. Still, the longer I observed the structure, the more the impossible began to feel plausible. There were tool marks too large, stone placements too heavy, and engineering too precise to fit within any known civilization. Everything hinted at builders with immense strength, builders capable of shaping monoliths that weighed several tons. I felt sweat gather on my brow despite the cold. Every discovery brought me closer to a truth I wasn't ready to face. I pulled out my notebook to document my findings, but my pen felt strange in my hand, almost inadequate compared to the magnitude of what lay before me. The pages quickly filled with sketches, measurements, and frantic notes. I drew the formation from multiple angles, trying to capture its scale. But no matter how detailed my drawings were, they failed to convey the overwhelming presence of the site. It felt alive. A relic not just of time, but of intention. As I stepped back to take a wider photograph, a faint vibration traveled through the ground beneath my boots. At first I thought it was an echo from distant machinery or a settling rock formation. But the tremor grew, rippling through the soil in a slow, deliberate rhythm. It was not random. It felt like footsteps, massive ones, traveling somewhere beneath the surface. My breath caught. The vibration faded as quickly as it came, leaving only the silent, icy wind behind. Fear and fascination battled inside me. If the carvings were real, if the impressions were genuine, then the stories told by early settlers and tribal elders were not myths, they were warnings. I felt the weight of that realization settle on me like a cold stone. Yet instead of retreating, I took another step closer to the monolith. Curiosity can be a dangerous force, especially when it collides with the unknown. A shadow shifted across the far tree line, so subtle I might have imagined it. But something about the movement felt purposeful. I raised my camera, zoomed in, and scanned the forest edge. Nothing. Only frost-covered pines and drifting mist. Still, the unease gnawed at me. I was alone on a ridge that held secrets older than civilization, and something in those woods wanted me to know I wasn't welcome. The radio on my belt crackled again, louder this time. A voice tried to break through the static, but only fragments reached me: movement, East Ridge, huge, then silence. I swallowed hard. Whatever was stirring in these mountains, it wasn't just geological. And as the clouds darkened overhead, I realized my expedition had just crossed a threshold from scientific curiosity into forbidden territory, territory where legends walked, and where ancient giants left their mark in stone. I reached the lower section of the ridge just as the morning fog thickened, crawling between the trees like a living veil. The soil here was rich, dark, and damp, perfect for preserving geological impressions. As I moved slowly, scanning the ground for artifacts, something unusual caught my attention near a fallen cedar. At first glance it looked like a shallow depression in the mud, but its outline was too sharp, too defined. I crouched down and brushed away loose debris, revealing a massive footprint unlike anything in the fossil record. The print measured nearly twice the length of my boot and carried a depth that suggested immense weight. 5 distinct toes pressed into the earth with a curvature both human-like and decidedly not human. The heel impression sank deeper than the rest, as if the being had paused mid-step or shifted its balance before moving on. My pulse raced as the possibilities tumbled through my mind. No bear, no primate, no known animal matched the anatomy before me. This was something else, something powerful. I reached for my camera but froze as I noticed additional prints leading away from the cedar, forming a trail that zigzagged toward the dense forest wall. Each footprint showed slight variations in pressure and orientation, indicating movement rather than random ground deformation. The stride length alone defied logic, nearly a meter between steps. Whatever left these tracks walked upright and moved with deliberate confidence. A chill crept down my spine, colder than the mountain air itself. As I followed the trail, the fog softened the world around me, muffling sound and blurring the outlines of trees. It felt as though the forest wanted to conceal what I was about to discover. But the prints remained unmistakably clear, guiding me forward like an ancient trail left for anyone daring enough to follow. Every step I took heightened the tension beneath my ribs. This was no ordinary archaeological site. This was an active presence, a living force captured in freshly disturbed earth. When the trail reached a narrow clearing, I noticed something that made my breath hitch. Several footprints overlapped as if the creature had paced in a circle. In the center of that circle, the ground had been compacted, flattened, and marked by deep scratches gouged into the soil. They formed patterns that hinted at communication, territorial, ritualistic, or perhaps something far older than human symbolism. I knelt to touch the marks, and the cold, wet ground sent a shiver through my fingers. The atmosphere shifted suddenly, as though the forest itself leaned closer to listen. Even the wind stilled. Every instinct screamed for me to step back, but curiosity anchored my feet. The soil felt unnaturally warm beneath my palm, holding residual heat from whatever had been here not long before. The forest floor shouldn't retain warmth like that, especially in freezing temperatures. It was as though the trail was alive with a presence that lingered beyond sight. I documented everything meticulously, photographs from multiple angles, measurement notes, density evaluations, and depth comparisons. The more data I collected, the more the anomaly deepened. These prints could not be faked. The pressure fracturing in the soil, the layered sediment displacement, the microcracks along the edges, all of it pointed to a massive, bipedal being weighing hundreds of kilograms. A hoaxer couldn't replicate such natural physics. Nature itself had recorded the truth. When I stood to continue the trail, the fog shifted behind me, revealing another set of prints I had missed earlier. These ones were slightly smaller, narrower, and spaced differently, another individual. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. This wasn't the path of a solitary creature. It was the movement of a group, perhaps even a family. The implications were staggering. If one existed, more existed. And if more existed, then the legends across continents carried a frightening consistency. The trail eventually led me to a creek bed where the prints vanished into flowing water. I scanned the opposite bank, searching for exit marks, but visibility was low. The silence pressed around me as I stepped onto a moss-covered boulder to gain a better vantage point. Then I saw it, a single footprint on the far bank, partially softened by water yet perfectly shaped. It faced the tree line, as though the creature had paused and observed something before slipping into the woods. A sudden crack echoed through the trees, sharp and deliberate. I spun around, pulse skyrocketing. The forest was motionless, but the sound hadn't been natural. It was too controlled, like a branch snapped intentionally to draw attention. I scanned the fog, searching for movement, but saw nothing except shifting shadows. The warm exhale of my own breath clouded the air in front of me. I was being watched. I felt it as surely as I felt the ground under my boots. Fear nudged at me, insisting I retreat while I still could. But scientific obsession overpowered reason. I stepped across the creek, landing near the softened print on the opposite bank. The size and weight distribution matched the earlier tracks perfectly. I traced the outline with my glove, feeling the deep, unwavering pressure that shaped it. A strange calm settled over me. I was standing in the path of something ancient, something intelligent, something that did not fear being found. The forest beyond the bank darkened as clouds gathered overhead, casting long shadows that stretched between the trees. I felt the weight of history pressing against me, the sense that I had crossed into a world where science blurred into myth. And yet the evidence was undeniable. The footprints were real, the trail deliberate, and the presence unmistakable. As I stood there, drenched in fog and adrenaline, one truth crystallized inside me: whatever left those tracks was still out there, moving, watching, and perhaps guiding me toward a revelation I wasn't ready to face. The deeper I ventured into the valley, the more the forest transformed around me. The trees grew thicker, older, their trunks marked with long vertical scars that looked deliberate rather than natural. Moss clung to everything, and the air grew dense with a cold humidity that felt almost subterranean. Then, beneath a collapsed cluster of roots, I spotted a stone edge peeking through the soil. It was perfectly straight, too perfect to be a random geological formation. My breath caught. Something lay buried beneath the forest floor. Clearing the soil with my gloves, I uncovered a rectangular slab that vibrated faintly beneath my touch, as if reacting to temperature changes or pressure. The stone was unlike any material native to this region, smooth, polished, and unnaturally cold despite the damp surroundings. When I brushed away more dirt, faint engravings emerged, geometric and disciplined. They matched the patterns I had seen on the ridge, confirming the impossible: these structures were connected across the mountain. I circled the exposed stone edge and discovered an opening partially concealed by thick roots. The roots had grown around it rather than through it, suggesting the structure predated the forest itself. A narrow passage descended into darkness, lined with the same cold, polished stone. The air that seeped out was stale, ancient, untouched by time. Every instinct warned me not to enter, but curiosity overruled caution. This was the kind of discovery archaeologists dream of, and fear. Turning on my headlamp, I squeezed through the roots and into the passage. My boots echoed faintly as I descended, the sound swallowed quickly by the chamber below. When the tunnel opened into a larger space, I froze. The chamber was massive, carved with architectural precision that defied the capabilities of known ancient civilizations. Walls soared upward into darkness, adorned with symmetrical carvings that glinted under my light. My mind raced. This wasn't a shelter or a tomb. This was a hall, an ancient archive. What struck me first were the massive stone pillars arranged in two perfect rows. Each pillar bore deep vertical grooves, not random but patterned, almost like a recorded history etched in stone. Between the pillars lay flat slabs covered in engravings, positioned like clay tablets from lost civilizations. But these slabs were enormous, weighing several tons each. Only beings of immense strength could have positioned them with such accuracy. The truth pressed heavily on my chest: I was standing inside a chamber built by giants. As I walked deeper into the hall, my headlamp caught something that made my heart thud violently. Massive handprints, embedded in the stone walls, each print several times larger than a human hand, spaced evenly across the chamber. They weren't decorative carvings, they were impressions left in softened stone, later hardened by time. The level of force required to make them was beyond comprehension. No human could have shaped stone like that. The legends of towering forest dwellers suddenly felt less like folklore and more like historical testimony. An elevated platform stood at the far end of the hall, reached by broad stone steps carved with perfect symmetry. Each step was wide, as though designed for a stride far longer than a human's. When I reached the platform, I found a circular depression in the center, filled with a thin layer of dust. It wasn't empty, tiny fragments of bone and shattered quartz lay scattered inside. The remains were oddly shaped, suggesting they belonged to creatures I could not identify. It was as though some ancient ritual or violent event had taken place here. My flashlight flickered as I examined the platform, causing shadows to dance across the towering pillars. The chamber seemed to react to my presence, as if it held an echo of the beings who once walked these halls. I ran my fingers across one of the engraved slabs, tracing its geometric sequences. The lines were too precise for primitive tools, suggesting advanced methods or astonishing physical ability. The question burned in my mind: were these markings records? Messages? Warnings? At the far corner of the hall, something metallic glinted beneath a fallen piece of stone. Metal this old should have corroded beyond recognition, yet the object shimmered faintly as I unearthed it. It was a cylindrical piece of alloy unlike any known ancient metallurgy. Smooth, perfectly balanced, and etched with the same geometric symbols. Its weight was disproportionate to its size, heavier than steel, but warm, as though it held energy of its own. My stomach tightened. This was not just an archaeological anomaly. This was technology. A deep rumble reverberated through the chamber, subtle but unmistakable. Dust drifted from the high ceiling, illuminated by my wavering beam of light. The ground felt as if it shifted under my boots. Instinctively, I stepped back, gripping the metallic object tightly. The rumble grew faint, then faded entirely. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick with the sense that I had disturbed something dormant. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes, as if the chamber itself was alive. My breathing grew shallow as I realized how far underground I must be. Above me lay layers of earth, forest, and history, each hiding this forbidden structure from the world. Yet something told me I wasn't alone down here. The presence I had felt on the ridge and near the footprints now pulsed stronger, echoing faintly through the stone walls. It was as though the builders themselves still lingered, watching from the shadows of time. The chamber belonged to them, not to humanity. I knew then that retreating was no longer an option. I had crossed a threshold into a realm of ancient truth, a truth the world had forgotten or been forced to forget. With the metallic artifact in hand and the chamber's engravings burned into my memory, I steeled myself to continue deeper into the underground passages. Whatever lay beyond this hall would either illuminate history or consume me entirely. But I had to follow the path. The Giants of Antiquity had left these clues for a reason, and I intended to uncover the purpose behind their forbidden legacy. I wasn't the first researcher to step into these mountains in search of answers. Over the years, scattered reports had surfaced from scientists, geologists, and anthropologists who claimed to have discovered strange anomalies similar to what I had found. Most of their accounts vanished quickly, buried under academic silence, dismissed as misinterpretation, or retracted under unclear circumstances. But once I began connecting the patterns, I realized many of them had disappeared shortly after releasing fragments of their findings. One of the most troubling cases involved Dr. Helena Cortland, a renowned paleoanthropologist who had published a brief abstract hinting at the existence of a gigantic bipedal species with advanced structural capabilities. Her paper was removed within 48 hours. 2 weeks later, she vanished during a field expedition in British Columbia. Her equipment was located neatly arranged beside a river, but no trace of her was ever found. Her colleagues never spoke of her again, as if an unspoken pressure kept them silent. Another case surfaced in old archives, a geologist named Robert Hensley, who reported finding stone columns deep in the Appalachians that mirrored the ones I had seen. His notes described enormous hand impressions embedded in granite walls, similar to the marks discovered in the underground chamber. Hensley contacted a museum curator about the site, but before an expedition could be organized, he died in what was ruled a remote hiking accident. The coordinates to his discovery were never recovered. There was also the unsettling account of a research duo, Dr. Samuel Ng and botanist Camille Reyes, who had claimed to detect vibrations beneath mountain soil that suggested movement from a large subterranean source. They recorded the phenomenon on multiple seismographs. But before their study could be published, both disappeared during a routine flora survey. Their GPS trackers were found crushed, as though flattened by tremendous weight. No official investigation was ever released. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that these scientists had been following the same breadcrumbs I now trailed: strange structures, impossible symbols, oversized footprints, and subterranean vibrations. They weren't conspiracy theorists, they were professionals with decades of experience. Their findings were consistent across regions and decades. Something enormous had left a pattern behind, and anyone who came too close to the truth seemed to vanish without explanation. Academic suppression also played a role. Several universities quietly shut down research grants connected to anomalous archaeology. Professors who pushed for independent expeditions suddenly retired early or transferred departments. One whistleblower, speaking anonymously, claimed that major institutions were pressured by federal agencies to classify these findings as environmental misidentifications. But the evidence was far too specific and too widespread for such a dismissal. Still, the most disturbing revelation came from a set of private letters I uncovered in a forgotten archive. Written by a cryptozoologist in the 1970s, the letters described a covert group of scientists who believed that giants once walked alongside early humans. They had found evidence, massive skeletal fragments, ancient tools, and carvings, and were preparing to publish their research. Before they could release their work, every member of the group vanished within 6 months. Their notes were confiscated. Their families received no answers. The letters included one chilling line that stayed with me: some knowledge is not lost, it is hidden, because it threatens those who claim authority over the past. That statement echoed through my mind as I stood in the silent forest. Was this why the underground chambers and ancient formations remained undocumented? Was this why the prints and vibrations went ignored? Perhaps the truth didn't fit the accepted narrative, and so it was buried, literally and figuratively. I wondered then if I, too, had stepped onto a path I couldn't turn back from. The presence in the woods, the chamber beneath the earth, the impossible footprints, they weren't isolated incidents. They were pieces of a story older than humanity, and someone clearly didn't want that story told. The disappearances weren't coincidences, they were warnings. And I was beginning to understand why the mountains felt alive with tension. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of pine and something else, something musky, heavy, and strangely familiar. It reminded me of the air inside the underground chamber, thick with age and hidden power. I paused, sensing movement near the tree line. Shadows rippled between the branches, too large and too deliberate to be explained by wildlife. My heartbeat quickened as I realized I was no longer alone, and that whatever watched me had been tracking my progress for longer than I wanted to admit. I tightened my grip on the metallic artifact I had found in the chamber, feeling its subtle warmth pulsing through my glove. It seemed to react whenever I approached clues tied to the giants. As the shadows shifted again, I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. The scientists before me had followed the same trail, uncovering fragments of a lost truth, and many of them had paid the price. Yet their work had not been in vain. I carried their torch now, whether I wanted to or not. If I turned back, the discoveries of Cortland, Hensley, Ng, and Reyes would remain buried forever. If I continued, I risked meeting the same fate. But something deep inside urged me forward. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was destiny. Or maybe the giants of antiquity wanted their story revealed at last. Whatever the reason, I stepped toward the tree lean, ready to follow the path that had consumed so many before me. Nightfall in the mountains carries a different kind of darkness, heavy, ancient, and almost sentient. As the sun dipped behind the peaks, the forest transformed into a labyrinth of shifting shadows and muted sound. I set up camp near a rocky overhang, hoping to review my notes before exhaustion overtook me. But the moment the last traces of daylight faded, the air changed. It grew thicker, colder, charged with an electric tension that made the hairs on my arms rise. Something was awake in the woods. At first, I dismissed the trembling of the ground as distant thunder, but the sky remained clear. The vibrations pulsed in rhythmic intervals, faint yet unmistakable, like the sound of massive footsteps echoing through the bedrock. I switched off my lantern and crouched low, listening. The forest, normally alive with nocturnal activity, had fallen eerily silent. Even the wind refused to move through the branches. It was as if every living creature sensed something colossal moving unseen beneath the canopy. A deep, resonant hum traveled through the air, low enough to feel more than hear. It rolled across the mountains like an ancient voice calling from beneath the earth. The sound reminded me of the vibrations recorded by scientists who had vanished decades earlier. My heart pounded as I realized I was witnessing the very phenomenon they had described. This was no seismic anomaly. It felt deliberate, patterned, almost communicative, as though the mountains themselves were transmitting a message. I crept toward the tree lean, keeping my footsteps light. The hum grew stronger, accompanied by a strange oscillation in the air that made my chest tighten. Mist drifted between the trunks, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Then, through the haze, I noticed movement, slow, deliberate, impossibly large. Something massive shifted behind the trees, its outline barely visible. I froze, breath shallow. The silhouette towered above the undergrowth, blending into the darkness like a creature evolved to rule it. A branch snapped, loud and sharp, echoing like a gunshot. My pulse thundered in my ears. The creature, or presence, stopped moving. The forest held its breath. Then another sound followed, a deep exhalation that seemed to vibrate through the trunks themselves. It was not the sound of any known animal. It was too controlled, too heavy, too intelligent. I felt an overwhelming urge to retreat, yet some invisible tether held me in place. The presence was aware of me, studying me as carefully as I studied it. The hum shifted tones, rising to a frequency that sent a tingling sensation through my limbs. The metallic artifact in my pocket grew warm, almost hot. I pulled it out and watched as faint luminous lines glowed along its surface, reacting to whatever stirred in the forest. It wasn't random. The artifact responded like a key held near its lock. My mind raced. Had this object been designed to resonate with the beings who built the underground chambers? And were those beings now standing somewhere beyond the mist? The footsteps returned, slow, powerful, and earth-shaking. Each one rattled loose pebbles around my feet. The silhouette moved closer, and the moonlight caught the edge of something enormous. Not fur. Not bare skin. Something in between, thick, textured, primordial. It moved with the confident stride of a creature that had never known fear of predators. Every legend I had ever dismissed came crashing back into my mind. The giants of antiquity were not myths. They were alive. They were watching. A sudden gust of wind tore through the clearing, swirling leaves and sending a cold shock through my body. The creature halted again, partially obscured by a cluster of ancient pines. For a moment, the forest seemed to glow with pale silver light. The mist curled around the trees like living smoke, revealing massive handprints on the bark, fresh, clean, unmistakable. My breath caught. Those prints matched the ones inside the underground chamber. I was standing in the territory of something that still walked these mountains. Then, without warning, the hum ceased. The vibrations vanished. The forest fell into a silence so absolute it felt unnatural. The silhouette stepped back, retreating into the deeper dark with a grace no creature of that size should possess. Its departure felt purposeful, almost respectful, as if granting me permission to witness its presence but forbidding me from approaching further. My knees trembled with a strange mixture of awe and terror. The mountains had shown me their guardian, and the message was clear: I was no longer exploring ruins. I was trespassing in a living domain. I backed toward camp, never taking my eyes off the treeline. The forest remained motionless, watching. When I finally reached my tent, the artifact dimmed to darkness once more, its glow fading as if the connection had been severed. I collapsed onto the cold ground, trying to steady my breathing. The night stretched on endlessly, filled with the echo of what I had seen. Every sound, every shadow carried new meaning. The legends were real. The footprints were real. The giants of antiquity still walked beneath the moon. As dawn approached, the forest slowly regained its natural rhythms. Birds called from the branches. Small animals scurried through the underbrush. It was as though the night's events had been swallowed by daylight, hidden behind a veil of normalcy. But I knew the truth now. The mountains had revealed their presence. The giants had made themselves known. And they weren't simply relics of a forgotten era, they were the keepers of knowledge older than humanity, guardians of a legacy we were never meant to uncover. When the first beam of sunlight broke through the trees, one final realization hit me with crushing clarity: the creature had not tried to harm me. It had observed me, assessed me, allowed me to live. Whatever purpose these giants served, they were intelligent enough to choose. And I had been chosen not as prey, but as a witness. The question that remained was terrifying: what did they want me to see next? Morning light filtered through the pines as I examined the metallic artifact again. Its surface, now cool, reflected the sunrise in muted tones. The engravings along its body were precise, symmetrical, and impossibly detailed, far beyond the capabilities of any ancient civilization documented in human history. As I rotated it in my hands, I felt a faint vibration deep within the core, as though the object contained some dormant mechanism waiting to be awakened. Nothing about it felt primitive. This was engineered. I retrieved my portable spectrometer and ran a preliminary analysis. The readings made no sense. The alloy composition did not match any known natural metal, nor any synthetic alloy produced in modern labs. Its density exceeded that of tungsten, yet it showed none of the brittleness that such density would typically cause. Instead, the artifact felt warm, flexible, almost alive. The deeper scans revealed internal structure, not circuitry, but something resembling organic patterns interwoven with metallic layers. The artifact's internal resonance frequency also defied explanation, falling into a range not produced by geological formations or conventional tools. It responded to ambient vibrations in the environment, particularly those emitted by the mountains during the previous night. When I tapped the artifact lightly, it emitted a soft, harmonic tone, as though responding to my touch. I recorded the sound, but playback produced interference, as if the audio file itself resisted being captured. Technology shouldn't behave like that. I set the artifact on a flat stone and stepped back. As sunlight touched its surface, the engravings flickered faintly, glowing with a pale metallic shimmer. It reacted to light. That alone was enough to rewrite archaeological theory. But the pattern of the glow felt deliberate, sections illuminating in sequences, forming what looked like coded pulses. I took photos and analyzed the sequence frame by frame. The pulses weren't random. They repeated in a structured pattern reminiscent of ancient counting systems or linguistic rhythms. A memory surfaced from my research, accounts from early scientists who reported artifacts that communicated through light or sound before their work vanished from academic archives. One described an object that emitted pulses matching seismic vibrations, as though resonating with the earth itself. Another mentioned metal fragments that responded to human proximity. I had dismissed those writings as exaggerations or misinterpretations. Now, holding the artifact in my hands, I realized they were describing something exactly like this. The more I studied it, the more impossible it became to deny the truth. This artifact belonged to the same beings who built the underground chamber. Its craftsmanship exceeded anything humans could have created in prehistoric times. The engravings, the energy pulses, the harmonic responses, they all pointed to advanced understanding of materials, acoustics, and possibly communication. This wasn't a ceremonial relic. It was a tool. Or a device. Or perhaps something far more significant. I pressed the base of the artifact gently, and for a moment it emitted a deeper tone, slow and resonant. The sound rippled through the ground, stirring loose dust around my boots. It felt like a signal, intentional, directional. My chest tightened. Had I activated something? Or had I simply awakened a dormant response waiting for the right conditions? The mountains answered with a faint tremor, subtle but undeniable. The artifact grew warmer in my palm. I realized I was interacting with something designed to interface with the environment itself. Fear mixed with exhilaration. If this artifact dated back thousands of years, then the giants who created it possessed not only physical strength but advanced engineering knowledge. They had manipulated stone like clay, carved symbols with perfect geometry, and constructed subterranean chambers that had withstood ages. Now I held a piece of their technology, an object built by a species humanity once dismissed as legend, myth, or superstition. The implications staggered me. But a more frightening question surfaced: why had this artifact been left behind? Was it forgotten? Hidden? Or intentionally placed for someone to find? The mountains felt alive with possibility. I remembered the presence watching me, the footsteps that shook the earth, the massive silhouette framed by moonlight. The giants had not vanished. They were active. They were observant. And they seemed to have an interest in who discovered their relics. Whether that interest was protective or predatory, I could not yet determine. As I packed my equipment, I noticed fresh impressions in the dirt behind me, large, deep, unmistakably bipedal. They hadn't been there when I arrived. My pulse spiked. The prints circled my camp, stopping only meters from where I slept. Whoever or whatever made them had approached silently in the night, watching as I lay unaware. The creature could have destroyed me effortlessly, yet it chose not to. Instead, it examined my presence, perhaps gauging my intentions. I followed the trail for a few steps, but it led into dense undergrowth where sightlines vanished. The forest felt charged with awareness, as if the trees themselves monitored my movements. The artifact pulsed faintly in my pack, responding to something I could not see. I realized then that the giants had allowed me to find one of their tools. They had allowed me to witness their presence. But permission was not the same as safety. I had crossed into forbidden territory, and whatever came next would test the limits of my understanding. With the artifact secured, I turned back toward the ancient valley. I had more clues to follow, more truths to uncover, and more hidden structures waiting beneath the earth. But a single realization burned through me with terrifying clarity: the giants were guiding my path. And the question I feared most lingered in the cold mountain air: were they guiding me toward enlightenment, or toward a reckoning humanity was never meant to face? The slopes grew steeper as I made my way toward the northern ridge, guided only by fragments of coordinates found in the notes of a vanished geologist. Each step carried me farther from the familiar paths used by hikers or researchers. Here, the forest grew denser, the trees older, their roots twisting like skeletal fingers gripping the mountainside. The air thinned, carrying a metallic scent that reminded me of the underground chamber. Something vast lay ahead, something untouched by time. Near a cluster of granite boulders, I noticed a strange formation: 3 stones standing upright, each one angled toward the center like a tripod of monoliths. Their surfaces were etched with deep geometric grooves, similar to those in the subterranean hall. But these carvings connected in a way that suggested alignment, not decoration. I circled the stones slowly, tracing my fingers along the cool surfaces. They formed a precise pattern, one that felt purposeful, almost like a coded map meant to be deciphered by those who understood its language. When I positioned myself between the stones, sunlight struck them at an angle that illuminated hidden markings. Fine lines glowed faintly, revealing interconnected shapes that stretched across the stone surfaces. The arrangement resembled a topographical layout, a landscape, mountains, valleys, and rivers carved with mathematical precision. My breath quickened as the realization settled in: the monoliths depicted this very region. The giants had mapped the land long before humans ever set foot here. The more I studied the carvings, the clearer the design became. Certain areas of the map were highlighted with deeper engravings, forming patterns reminiscent of nodal points or energy sources. They aligned with known geological anomalies, areas where strange vibrations had been recorded for decades. But several markings referenced locations uncharted in any modern database. Hidden valleys, sealed caverns, and subterranean chambers nestled beneath the mountain range. This was no simple map. It was a network of sites built by an ancient civilization. I photographed the monoliths from multiple angles, then began cross-referencing the carvings with topographical data stored on my GPS. The similarities were uncanny. In some areas, the giants' map was more accurate than modern surveys. Elevation shifts matched perfectly, river patterns aligned precisely, and fault lines were depicted centuries before geological science existed. Whoever carved this map understood the land better than any human culture in recorded history. At the base of the central stone, I discovered a recessed panel filled with fine crystalline dust. When I brushed it away, I uncovered a series of symbols arranged in repeating sequences. They appeared to represent measurements, distances, depths, and possibly even astronomical alignments linked to seasonal changes. My heart pounded. This was advanced cartography, the kind used by a species that navigated the landscape with sophisticated knowledge of geology and celestial movement. A sudden gust of cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying the faint scent of earth and wet stone. The trees creaked under the pressure, and loose leaves spiraled upward before scattering across the ground. The artifact in my pack vibrated faintly, reacting to something I couldn't see. I turned in all directions, scanning the forest for movement. The tension in the air thickened, pressing against my chest. The giants had carved this map for a reason, and they knew I had found it. My eyes returned to the monoliths. One symbol repeated more frequently than the others, a series of intersecting lines shaped like a gateway or threshold. It appeared near several locations on the map, suggesting areas of significance. These were not random waypoints. They were entrances. Hidden passages designed to lead into the mountain itself. The carvings indicated underground structures far larger than the chamber I had already discovered. Entire complexes existed beneath the earth. As I studied the markings further, a chilling thought crossed my mind: the giants had not built their halls at random. They built them along geological lines where natural energy pulsed: faults, subterranean rivers, volcanic seams. These were areas where the earth hummed with ancient resonance, a frequency the giants had harnessed. They were not merely builders. They were engineers of the planet's natural forces. And the map before me was a blueprint of their power. I felt watched again. The sensation grew stronger, heavier, as though an immense presence observed from beyond the tree-line. A deep crack echoed through the forest, followed by the rustle of something enormous moving between the pines. My throat tightened. The guardians of these mountains would not reveal their secrets without ensuring the seeker understood the weight of what they discovered. The giants were near, closer than ever. The artifact pulsed again, stronger this time, its internal energy resonating with the monoliths. The ground beneath my boots vibrated in a slow, steady rhythm, as though the earth acknowledged the connection. I realized the stones weren't merely a map, they were a key. A mechanism. A trigger waiting for the right conditions, the right person, or perhaps the right moment in history. And I had activated something far beyond my understanding. As the vibrations faded, the forest exhaled a long, low breath, and silence reclaimed the clearing. I took one last look at the monoliths, committing their details to memory. I knew what I had to do next: follow the map. Explore the entrance points. Delve deeper into the ancient network beneath the earth. The giants had charted these pathways for a reason. And whatever lay hidden within them was the next chapter of a truth humanity had been shielded from for centuries. The journey toward the first marked entrance on the giants' map led me through terrain untouched by modern hikers. Thick canopies blocked most sunlight, leaving the forest floor in a permanent twilight. Moss-covered roots twisted like ancient veins across the ground, forcing me to navigate carefully. The air grew heavier, colder, as though I was entering a region sealed away from time. Every step echoed with the weight of the giants' presence, guiding me toward a destination only they truly understood. I reached a steep ravine where the map indicated a hidden passage. The cliffs towered above me, sheer and jagged, but something about their formation felt intentional rather than natural. Horizontal tension marks lined the stone as though colossal hands had once pried the earth open. At the base of the ravine, a narrow fissure stretched across the rock wall. It was too symmetrical to be accidental. I approached, brushing my hand along the cold stone. The fissure responded with a faint vibration. The artifact in my pack pulsed with warmth, resonating with the vibrations beneath my palm. Its glow seeped through the fabric, casting soft metallic light. I removed it and held it toward the fissure. The stone reacted immediately. A low rumble traveled through the cliff face, dislodging pebbles that clattered at my feet. Dust drifted downward like ancient breath released from the mountain's lungs. My heart hammered. The map was accurate. This was an entrance, sealed long ago, but not forgotten. As the rumbling faded, a section of the fissure widened by a few centimeters. Not enough to enter, but enough to confirm the truth: the passage was not a natural crack in the rock. It was a door, one built to respond to the artifact's energy. The giants had engineered this threshold with precision, ensuring only those who carried their tools could open it. The realization stunned me. These beings had created a system of access control thousands of years before modern technology existed. I stepped back to study the stone surface more closely. Massive hand impressions covered the exterior, each print deep enough to suggest immense pressure. The fingers were long, powerful, and unmistakably purposeful. The impressions aligned along the fissure, as though the giants had once pressed their hands against the stone to close or open the entrance. The scale of their strength was beyond comprehension. They hadn't just built chambers, they had shaped mountains. A sudden gust of cold air swept from the fissure, chilling my skin. The wind carried a scent of damp earth, minerals, and something older, almost fossil-like. It wasn't the smell of decay but of preservation, as though the mountain exhaled air that had been sealed inside for centuries. I felt a strange reverence wash over me. The giants hadn't abandoned these structures. They had preserved them, waiting for a time when they might be needed again. I placed the artifact against the fissure once more. This time, the glow intensified, illuminating the carvings around the entrance. Symbols emerged from the stone, geometric sequences arranged like coordinates. They pulsed in rhythm with the artifact's energy. I recorded everything, but I knew the recordings would never capture the full magnitude of what I witnessed. The symbols were alive with meaning, transmitting knowledge through vibration rather than words. The ground beneath my boots vibrated again, stronger this time. Leaves trembled across the forest floor. A deep resonance echoed through the ravine, as though something massive stirred beneath the mountains. The sound grew louder, more defined: footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and impossibly heavy. My pulse spiked. I spun toward the tree line, scanning for movement. Shadows shifted between the pines, tall and broad. The giants were near, closer than I had ever felt them. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a long, steady exhalation from within the forest. The air thickened with pressure, as if acknowledging my presence at the entrance. The artifact pulsed rapidly, reacting to both the fissure and the unseen giants. I felt caught between two forces, the ancient technology embedded within the mountain and the living beings who had created it. Both were aware of me. Both were watching. And neither seemed threatened by my presence, yet. I took a cautious step back, unsure whether opening the passage further would provoke a reaction. The shadows in the forest remained still, waiting. The silence grew heavier, filled with an unspoken tension. I realized that the giants were giving me a choice. I could push deeper into their world or retreat with the knowledge I had gained. But retreat felt impossible now. I had seen too much. Understood too much. The path forward called to me like destiny carved in stone. The artifact dimmed, signaling the end of its resonance for now. The fissure closed slightly, as though returning to rest. The giant's presence slowly withdrew into the forest, their footsteps muffled by distance. Yet the feeling of being observed lingered, etched into my bones. This was only the beginning. The map pointed to several more entrances, each one leading to deeper layers of the giant's world. And the guardians of the mountains had allowed me to stand at their threshold without stopping me. As I prepared to leave the ravine, one truth settled in my mind with chilling certainty: the giants were not merely ancient builders. They were custodians of knowledge far older than humanity. They controlled passages within the earth, engineered with precision and purpose. And now, by revealing the first gateway to me, they had issued an invitation, or a warning. Either way, I had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. The ancient paths had awakened, and they were waiting for me to follow. The deeper I ventured into the mountains, the clearer it became that I was walking through the remnants of a forgotten world, one shaped by hands larger, stronger, and wiser than anything recorded in human history. The giants were not myths or symbols. They were architects, engineers, guardians of a knowledge so vast that even glimpsing a fraction of it reshaped my understanding of existence. Their chambers, artifacts, and maps were not relics of extinction but evidence of a living legacy hidden behind the veil of wilderness. Every discovery pulled back another layer of a truth humanity had long denied. The underground hall, the massive handprints, the perfect stone formations, each piece formed a tapestry that defied the timelines accepted by modern science. These beings had walked the earth alongside early humans, constructing structures that rivaled our greatest achievements. Their knowledge of geology, resonance, and natural energy surpassed anything we believed possible in ancient eras. They were giants not only in size, but in mastery. Yet what unsettled me most was not their strength or intelligence, but their silence. They watched without intervening, observed without attacking, and allowed me to uncover pieces of their world without ever revealing their full presence. This restraint hinted at purpose, not fear. They were selective in what they showed, deliberate in what they allowed. It felt less like secrecy and more like guardianship, an ancient responsibility passed down through generations of colossal beings who remained hidden for reasons we could only imagine. The missing scientists, the suppressed reports, the silent universities, all of it suddenly made sense. The truth about the giants threatened the foundations of human history, archaeology, and anthropology. It challenged the dominance of our narrative, revealing that we were not the first advanced builders. Institutions had chosen suppression over revelation. Governments had chosen caution over truth. And the giants themselves had chosen to remain unseen, revealing themselves only to those who searched with genuine intent. As I reflected on the footprints around my camp, the vibrations beneath the earth, and the silent presence watching from the tree-line, I realized I had been tested. The giants could have harmed me at any moment. Instead, they guided me, subtly, deliberately, toward understanding. The artifact they allowed me to find was not a random relic. It was a key, a message, and perhaps an invitation to witness a world larger than human comprehension. They were judging humanity through me, one cautious step at a time. The map and the monoliths proved their knowledge extended far beyond a single chamber or mountain. Entire networks of caverns, halls, and entrances lay hidden across the continent. Some sealed. Some forgotten. Some waiting for the right conditions to awaken. These ancient pathways connected regions of geological significance, areas where the earth hummed with natural energy. The giants used these currents like highways, understanding the planet in ways modern science has only begun to explore. My journey taught me that their world is not separate from ours, it is intertwined, layered beneath the forests, rivers, and mountains we take for granted. The giants shaped the land long before humans built their first settlements. They carved hallways beneath ridges, mapped fault lines with precision, and engineered structures designed to last beyond eras. Humanity inherited a world they shaped, yet we know almost nothing about them. And perhaps that ignorance was intentional, a safeguard for both species. The questions that remain are vast and unsettling. Why did the giants retreat into obscurity? What event forced them underground or pushed them into silence? Did they witness something in humanity that caused them to withdraw? Or are they waiting for a sign, a threshold we have not yet crossed? The mountains hold the answers, but they will not give them freely. Knowledge of this magnitude demands respect, humility, and a willingness to accept truths that shatter established beliefs. Standing on the ridge one final time, I felt the mountain tremble beneath me, not in threat, but acknowledgement. The presence in the forest lingered, watching from the shadows, ensuring I understood the weight of what I carried. The artifact pulsed faintly in my pack, responding to the silent guardians nearby. It was a reminder that my journey was not an ending but a beginning. The giants had opened a door, and now the responsibility rested with me to decide what to do with the truth. I know that revealing everything would unleash chaos upon the academic world and shake the foundations of global history. Yet hiding the truth feels equally dangerous. The giants left clues deliberately, as if expecting someone to connect them. They mapped their world not to conceal it but to preserve it. Their silence was not fear, it was patience. And now, after centuries of watching, they had finally shown themselves once more to a seeker willing to listen. As I descended the mountains, the forest returned to its natural rhythm. Birds sang. Wind rustled the branches. The giants retreated into the quiet depths of their realm, leaving behind only traces for those bold enough to follow. But the ground still vibrated occasionally, subtle and rhythmic, like a distant heartbeat. A reminder that they were still there, ancient and alive, waiting for the day humanity proves itself worthy of learning the full truth of the giants of antiquity. In the end, one truth stands above all: the story of human history is incomplete. The giants were here long before us, shaping the land with strength and wisdom beyond anything we imagined. Their legacy is carved into the mountains, hidden in the earth, and guarded in silence. And now that I have seen their world, now that I have heard the mountains speak, I understand that some truths cannot be buried forever. Not when the earth itself remembers.